Thanks, Jonas. Very impressive once again. I wonder if I could invite all of the speakers for this last session to come up the front and we'll have some discussion prior to a tea break, short tea break. So any questions from the lady over here with her hand up, Lucy?
Sorry, it was just a quick question about the posting out of patient information before they start on the study. I'd never heard about that for any of my studies, and I was wondering if anyone else had.
It's news to me. My colleagues will correct me if I'm wrong, but
no, I've not heard of that from any study ever, and that's also from working on the ground at recruiting centres in the past as well. It just seems to be unique to one centre.
We do have this interesting thing where individual R&D departments seem to come up with their own rules and regulations. I mean, when we were setting it up, one of them said they had to send it out for ethical review, and we said, well, it's already been through the National Ethics Committee, and they said, well, we always send it out for our own ethics committee to make sure we agree with the National Ethics Committee in terms, and we get all that we've had quite a lot of that kind of strange behaviour from various places around the country. But Nick, I mean, what's your
I don't know. I think it is a particularly zealous member of the quality department of our R&D department who says it's contrary to GCP to send out a patient information letter without an approved cover letter. I find it a bit obstructive. Would it be difficult to produce an approved cover letter?
No. Do you have to stand on one leg when you send it out? Is that
I guess so, yeah. Because that might solve our problem if you could just say, here's the approved cover letter.
I mean, John, you're a big cheese in NIHR. What do you say to this? I mean, do you want to give John the microphone? Just apart from being gobsmacked, to use the vernacular.
Well, it's a very, as you say, you get this variation. One person decides this, and who's to say they're wrong? It's impossible for you to do it. Whether we could get a letter, I mean, it may be that our overzealous sponsors department then says, well, we can't approve this letter because it has to be approved by Manchester because it's being sent from Manchester. I don't know. It's just silly games, isn't it? It's silly games, and somebody needs to be told it's silly games, and they just need to get on and do the research.
Yeah, so that's it. There we are. Matt?
We've used this approach, and basically we got around it by saying that letter was part of the clinical care of the patient, so it came from the consultant, and we basically include an information sheet with it, and then you don't need any kind of research governance approvals for that letter because it's part of their clinical care. Okay. And we did actually check with our R&D department whether that was allowed before we did it, though.
Right, and the answer was it was okay.
It was okay.
So that should be all right in Manchester, presumably. We'll see. Any other? Sorry, Joe.
Yeah. I just suppose another way around it would be to call the patient beforehand, then pop the PIS into an envelope with just a compliment slip.
But we have had some pushback from telephone communication as well, haven't we? We've been told by some places that we shouldn't be phoning the patients, I think. So, yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir. You've got a microphone for this gentleman here.
Farhan Ahmad from Reading. Traditionally, we've been quite cautious about stenting the popliteal segment. And, it's a point of flexion, potentially a site of future bypass. And we've had several patients who have had popliteal disease. We've said, no, we won't consider them. Are we being overly cautious?
I would defer to my IR colleagues. Nick, what do you think?
We've had exactly the same thoughts, and I know exactly what you mean, but I'm, as I say, gradually increasing my area of uncertainty about what works, what doesn't work. One solution in this situation doesn't apply to the drug-eluting stent, but there isn't. I don't think there's a particular drug-eluting stent designed for the popliteal, so it doesn't really apply to BASIL 3. But there are obviously one or two stents on the market which are being promoted for the popliteal segment, but that's not really relevant here. Primary stenting of the popliteal. it's an area for personal judgment. My own area of uncertainty is increasing. I don't have an absolute rule about not stenting the popliteal.
Yeah. I mean, we've heard that comment, that what you've said a few times, but then on the other hand, we have many patients being randomised in many centres where they've been happy to do that. And again, it's one of these variations in opinion that you get when you go from centre to centre. I guess in the end, if you just feel it's absolutely the wrong thing to do, but perhaps you just need to broaden that area of equipoises.
We do get that. That's a comment that's frequently given to us in lots of meetings that we go to, and I can understand the hesitancy. We did look at the literature because it was coming up quite frequently, and there's nothing in the literature to suggest it's a good or a bad idea. And we certainly have centres that do not care and will do it, and they get just as good as results stenting and not stenting. But we do also have centres that are uncomfortable and won't do it.
And yeah, there was another hand up. Sorry. Yes, gentleman there.
So just a technical question. And if it was randomized for stenting and the stent require preparation with ballooning, that's also acceptable, isn't it?
I believe so. Yes. I mean, yes. I think. I mean, there is a lot of variation in technique. Even what you would consider to be a straightforward SFA intervention, there's a lot of variation. I mean, one of the things that we haven't discussed, and this has come up recently with a centre in the West Midlands that's struggling to get open to BASIL 3, is the cost of the procedures, the cost of the devices. My sense is it hasn't been a huge problem, and we do have over $500,000 of what we call excess treatment costs, which have been factored in as part of the grant application. And I think the idea, John, is that CCGs are supposed to fund the cost of the devices. But we are getting pushback from some CCGs and not others. And I just wonder if there's anyone on the panel or in the room would like to talk to that, because a number of centres have raised it. Has it been a problem? Yeah.
I suppose it's what you came into this trial delivering as your standard of care.
Can I just get... Yeah.
Sorry, James, again. I suppose it depends on what your centre was delivering as standard care before you went into the trial. And if you weren't putting in elution technology at that stage, and that will obviously put lots of barriers in place towards funding. But I think there was quite a number of units that came into this trial knowing that they were already delivering this as part of their standard of care. So it's not a specific problem for us in our area at the moment.
Right. I mean, at Heft, so thank you very much to my colleagues at Heartlands Hospital, because we've got like 60 patients in the trial. So Hoss, Martin, my colleagues that are here, how have we managed to absorb the additional costs of the devices? Has it been a problem, or has it not really been an issue for you? Anybody want to?
Well, it hasn't been an issue because we've been reassured that we'll be reimbursed, so we just go on and do it.
Okay, all right. Yes, sir. Oh, sorry, Nick, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say we had to make it clear in the early stages that all 3 treatment options were available and provided anyway, and so they're not considered part of the research. That worked for us.
And these devices are off tariff, is that correct? I mean,
they're off tariff. Well, yeah, the expensive ones are. Yes, they get added up on a individual month end. Somebody goes through and counts up the number of expensive devices, use it, and they're off tariff.
Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah, it was just in relation to the cost of devices. When we set up our centre as a trial, I spoke to our business manager because there was this issue about the cost of the devices, and I was told that they're excluded devices and the trust will get the money back at some point. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was the case when we set it up.
Yeah. Has anyone here found this to be a major problem? I mean, I'm getting the sense that no, really. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for our panel? Matt, can I just ask you about the CRN? I mean, how is it decided that you only have a CRN nurse supporting BASIL for 1 day a week? What's the kind of logic and thought process behind that when you're doing so well at recruitment?
So the logic and thought process is that each year we write down total portfolio recruitment across tier 1, 2 and 3 studies.
Right.
We submit that to our R&D department and they decide how much funding we get for the following year.
Right.
So we got 1 PA of consultant time, which we converted into a research nurse salary.
Okay.
And that's for all of our studies, it's not just BASIL.
Oh, really?
So when you consider we're doing portfolio studies that generate thousands of recruitment because they're tier 3 studies,
Yes.
it's a problem. I understand in the West Midlands you have a much more transparent system. In the East Midlands we don't. I don't know if anybody's from CRNs. No. Nobody's willing to put their hand up as being from a CRN anyway.
I'm not from a CRN, but I can tell you that the West Midlands system is so transparent that it's invisible.
Ooh. Apparently we're having it in the East Midlands soon, so I'm really glad to hear that.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? So, Jonas, I mean, it's an extraordinary thing that you can recruit such a high proportion of patients into this registry RCT, and I get the sense that, so it's 40 patients a month, I think, as you said, and the population of Sweden is about 11 million, and we have a population of about 62 million in the UK, so we should be recruiting 5 times as many. I mean, it's a bit of a silly comparison, but I get the sense there's quite a big sense of community amongst the vascular units in Sweden. I don't know if you want to talk. How do you nurture that kind of national pride in vascular units in a network? I mean, how do you do that? How can we learn from that?
Really don't know, but we are quite kind to each other on meetings.
Well, that's never going to work here. I'm sorry, forget it.
And I mean, there is, what is it, 80 consultants in vascular surgery and maybe 40 interventional radiologists. So basically, we know each other, everyone, and we meet twice a year, most of us.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the explanation why.
And what is the relationship like between vascular surgery and interventional radiology in Sweden? It's a good relationship, is it?
Depends on which hospital you work at. But at my hospital and a lot of the big centers, there is no fight. And there is also a lot of vascular surgeons taking over the interventional radiology. But we haven't had the endovascular war in Sweden. We have some units which is very pro-endovascular. Everything is done primarily endovascular, and they are transparent with this. We do everything endovascular from the beginning. They do one open aortic per year or something.
Right.
But most centers have a balanced view on both methods.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? If not, shall we break?